and perhaps to use these models, to go to Hardwick as a classic example, but to go to Brattleboro and Keene, or to go to Montpelier or Burlington to see how they're doing it. Partly it would be based on inventorying the agricultural possibilities, organizing the farmers who exist at the present time, and seeing what they can do to be contributing to the hub and therefore bettering their own economic return as a result, and so forth. So it takes community organization, and it takes the entrepreneurial class that may know nothing about agriculture but knows about business and can handle the processing. And those who are a little bit attuned to various forms of engineering and so forth to become involved. You know, people in a given area have all kinds of different skills as well as different interests. So you have to get that, and you have to get some of the financial people involved and so forth. And this is what happened in Vermont. But we're much better endowed than Hardwick, Vermont, for all of these people skills. They would envy anything they would see here. It could be the regional planning commissions. How about Rockingham and Strafford getting together and doing that? It would make more sense.
I love to eat.
Right. It would make a lot of sense to do that and to identify it maybe as New Hampshire Seacoast or maybe the totality of the two counties. I wouldn't go too much bigger than that. That's fairly big.
Why
right
not
there.
York and
Yeah.
Strafford rather
Yeah.
than Strafford and Rochester?
Yes, York, yeah, if you can get across the state line issues, absolutely. And that brings up another question. I'm often asked to speak in York County. I've given a lot of talks in York County. And I open up every one of those talks with a remark that gets a questioning stare. I say, I'm so happy to be here in York County, the future breadbasket of Portsmouth and the New Hampshire Seacoast. And they think, what in the world is this guy talking about? And I said, all you got to do is look on a map to see where all the farm and potential farmland is in this greater region. Most of it is in York County. York is very, very well endowed with farming potential in a way that we've destroyed a lot of it. Bigger tracts of land, in other words, in a way that we've destroyed in Rockingham and in Strafford, and York is there. And Portland in the future is going to get a lot of its food from points west and north of Portland, whereas York County can market to New Hampshire at a better price, and York County can market to the northeastern areas of Massachusetts at a better price as well, because York represents the nearest rural land north of Boston, for example, even though we have some. And even towns like Rye and Hampton, by the way, are doing a great job right now at local agriculture, and you don't think of them today as local agriculture. So, you raise a good point there, and York County will be our future breadbasket. And interestingly, Wolf Pine Farm in Alfred, they have organized about 15 farmers in the Alfred area where land prices are clearly cheaper than they are here. 15 farms, and guess where they're marketing? UNH and Phillips Exeter Academy. And they started marketing the Phillips Exeter and got this idea, look, we're passing through Durham all the time to get down to Exeter. They bring this stuff down on a CSA. This is a winter CSA, November to April. And the way they're marketing at UNH is the offices, the business offices. And their biggest clientele will clearly be the secretaries, the clerical staff, and so forth, because they deliver to the offices. That's the plan. And if you want delivery to your home, pay an extra $20 or $30, and they will deliver it to your home if your home is not too remote. They will do that as well. They offer that as a service. But they'll deliver to the office. Most people think that's fine. They'll take it from their own office. And they're coming in, and they'll come into the loading zones behind buildings. They won't even have parking issues on campus, because you can always pull up in loading zones, keep your flashers on, and just stay a couple of minutes, get rid of your product and move. There's no problem. So they can market at UNH. They are already marketing significantly at Bowdoin College and Bates College. And they like the colleges. They like to hit the colleges. They also get students who are living off campus, who are not in the dining services, and they get some faculty, and they get various others. But the most enthusiastic audience, they tell me, is the office staffs in these buildings. So now this is Alfred. Now we all know where Alfred is. It's not around the corner, but it's not too far. It's not a bad distance, as long as gasoline prices don't get too ridiculous, to bring pickup trucks down as far as Exeter. And so here it is. It's happening. York County is becoming the breadbasket in that very interesting way. But that is not to put down either our present farmers or our potential farmers. And that's why I mentioned Hampton and Rye. People think, Hampton and Rye, that's south of here. That's towards Boston. How much prospect would they have for food production? They are doing great things in those two towns right now. And they both have agricultural commissions. And Northampton and Rye are doing that. Brentwood is doing it. There's other towns to the south that are doing a great job. So now I wanted to point out, because in my book Pastures of Plenty, I don't know if any of you remember the name Sid Pilgrim. Sid was New Hampshire State soil scientist for more than a quarter of a century. He's now retired but still teaching in our department at UNH. And he and I had lunch one day and got this idea about grazing soils. And I said, Sid, has anyone ever developed grazing soils maps for New England? And he says, not to his mind. So I said, well, why don't we get some done and we'll put them in the book. So these are exclusive. Look at Vermont. Green is excellent, not good. Excellent. Couldn't be better. Green. And then, of course, you can see Massachusetts is well endowed with really good grazing soils. And we skip the tillable areas like the Champlain Valley or the Connecticut Valley in Massachusetts, because you don't want to take tillable acreage and convert it to grazing. You could do it, but it'd be silly because we're short on tillable acreage, so you keep that in till. Maine's so big it's got 2 pages. And then, of course, then you ask the question, well, what about the gray? A lot of that area which is gray is perfectly suitable for grazing, but it's something less than excellent. There's the New Hampshire map for excellent soils. But again, you're not to be deterred from the gray. So then I look at this map that was set up over here, right here, and you can see that there are very, very good agricultural soils in these green markings in 2 different areas of the county. But then you ask the question, well, what about all that white? Well, that's something less than prime. But that's all grazable, virtually all of it. It's grazable as long as it's nothing but bedrock coming out. And the fact that you've got rocks, stones, hills, mountains does not deter grazing. Grazing is the heritage of New Hampshire. It's the food security for 300 years in this state, and it's going to be our future food security. And that's why I entitled this book, Pastures of Plenty, the future of food, agriculture, and environmental conservation in New England. And the idea behind this book is that grass farming, as the Vermonters choose to call it for good reasons, we might call it that, we might call it grazing, is going to be our future food security. And that means meat and dairy at the center, and then you've got vegetables, fruit, and grains integrated on the periphery. And that's how we'll provide food for ourselves in the future. So it's got to be grazing with dairy, the whole range of dairy product, and the whole range of meat product. And when I say meat, that includes poultry and pork. You might not think of poultry and pork as grazing because they're not ruminants, but you shouldn't restrict yourself to cows and sheep and so forth. Poultry and pork can get significant portions of their diet from grazing, and then they need to be supplemented in one way or another. Goats as well. Goats are browsers rather than grazers, but we have plenty of opportunity to produce meat and dairy from goats. Yes?
Some of the young people are very excited about soil building through these rotational grazing.
Yes.
So you can improve your soil.
Right. Intensive rotational grazing, sometimes called management intensive grazing, where you're moving the animals roughly every 12 to 24 hours. If you're in dairy and you're doing it right, those animals are moving at least every 12 hours from one paddock to another all the way through the grazing season, and the average paddock might be used twice in a given grazing season. It depends on the local soils, the local plant composition, and whether it's been a dry year or a wet year. You can't make general pronouncements and say exactly this is how you do it, because the question is, well, what field are you talking about and what year are you talking about? And then, of course, how long you leave them on the land. Well, is this June? Is this August? Is this September? There's a difference between June and August, say. So you treat the land differently between those months. But intensive rotational grazing or management intensive grazing, and ideally multi-species grazing, either simultaneously or consecutively. For example, in nature, as a basic principle of ecology, birds follow ruminants. So if you put beef cattle or dairy cattle or sheep out on the land, when you take them off the pasture, you should be immediately putting birds in. Whether that's chickens or turkeys or geese or ducks, you should be immediately putting birds in. So they'll break the pathogens and the parasites and the cycles. You'll significantly reduce parasitism in the sheep as a result of doing that, and you'll have healthier plants, healthier animals all the way around, and then you get the second product of the eggs or the meat from the chickens. Joel Salatin, a great farmer from Virginia who's written wonderful books, is one of the gurus of this area, and he's no stranger to New Hampshire. He's been around here a number of times. I don't know if any of you saw Joel when he spoke to a sold-out house at the Seacoast Repertory Theater in Portsmouth a few weeks ago. But just before he spoke in Portsmouth, he was with me and my class at UNH, spending an hour sitting in our circle with the freshmen. And they were kind of idolizing him, not because they knew who he was, but because most of their parents knew who he was. And my students would say to me, "My parents can't believe that you invited Joel Salatin to the classroom." Now, I admit you may never have heard the name Joel Salatin. If you Google Joel Salatin, you'll see a lot about his books and his articles and so on. But I've known Joel for quite a few years, and he was a guest in our home, as a matter of fact, about 6 years ago. And I've spent time with him in other places.
Professor Carroll.
Yes.
So is it breaking your heart to see what's happening at the Tuttle farm in Dover?
Yeah, but we're still hopeful.
Okay.
We're still hopeful, and I am in very close contact with Suzanne Brown, the head of the Institute for New Hampshire Agriculture and Forestry in Conway, who is a major player in Dover and spends 1 or 2 days a week, every week, trying to get things done in Dover. And I'm very hopeful with Dan Barafaldi, a good friend of mine, who is Director of Economic Development for the City of Dover, and a wonderful person, by the way. I'm very impressed with Dan, and he is on top of it. But, you know, you have family issues. That's really the issue. The issue is human issues. I shouldn't say too much, but the issue is human issues.
What, is it an
They're kind of
opportunity
waiting
for
until
cooperative?
bankruptcy is. Pardon me?
Is it an opportunity for? Is that what's going on there now? Sort of a cooperative thing? Other people
Yeah,
coming
there
on?
are 4 farmers, 2 that have been working there, and they have 80 pigs and a couple of hundred chickens. We bought some chickens from them. We live in Durham. We bought some chickens from them to sort of encourage them and so forth. But and there's going to be 2 more farmers joining them with the full approval of the Tuttle family, which is still the owner. But the Tuttle family could lose their ownership, I'm told, within a few weeks to the bankruptcy of the banks. And the people who have been dealing with the Tuttles, Dan Barafaldi and Suzanne Brown and others, are almost at the point of saying we'd rather deal with the banks at this point. It's been tough. And I can sympathize, because how many hundred years are we talking? 1638?
Yeah.
And the current generation is committing the action of getting rid of them, getting rid of the farm. It must be terribly tough. And to have your life dominated by something you don't necessarily want your life to be dominated by, it's tough. Tough situation. Yes?
The tax implications of what you're talking about, the conventional wisdom is the best and highest use of property
Right.
to develop.
Right.
Is there any way we can build incentives into the property tax system so that people will keep? I don't know. I have a garden, somebody,
Right.
Bees.
Right.
That probably reduces the value of my property.
Mm-hmm.
Potential sale. But can we do something to encourage people to keep putting land in agriculture?
In a lot of aspects, we're going to have to change what we call conventional wisdom. I gave a talk to the Institute for Corporate Sustainability in the Whittemore School. They had a 3-day conference not too long ago. And we focused on this whole phrase, the new normal. And what do we mean by the new normal? That means fundamental change. And conventional wisdom is going to have to change. But the question is, how hungry do you have to get before you change your attitudes about local food and about arranging things so that local food production is incentivized, is favored, is incentivized, and so forth. And there are a lot of aspects of the way we've been doing things for 40 or 50 years which separate us so much from agrarianism. And we in Durham are especially guilty of this, because Durham ought to be in many ways looked at as the capital of agrarianism in New Hampshire. It's the home of the land-grant university, the Ag Experiment Station, the Cooperative Extension Service, the university farms. It's got the same agricultural heritage over 300 or more years that many towns have. And yet,